This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. This Sunday, New York City is set to host what could be the largest climate change protest in history, when organizers expect more than 100,000 people to converge for a People's Climate March. Many have already arrived from around the country. On Thursday night, the People's Climate Train pulled into Penn Station after a cross-country trip that began in California with stops in Reno, Denver, Salt Lake City, Omaha, and Chicago.
My name is Valerie Love. I work for Center for Biological Diversity as the No Tar Sands organizer. And I've been organizing this People's Climate Train, which has been beyond our wildest expectations. We had 170 climate activists come together on a 4-day cross-country trip where we had workshops and teach-ins, discussions, art and music all along the way. And we saw the amazing beauty of our country as well as the very real climate impacts and learned about the community struggles all along the way.
My name is Amanda G.C. Butu. I am 27 from San Francisco, California, and I got on the climate train as an invited guest. But on the train, I've learned so much about how I can be a part of the movement of helping save the climate. I do community gardening, which is already one step in the right direction, but I want to be able to impact more people. And with the information that I retained on this trip, I feel like I can further my movement of helping others with fresh food and fresh water and just being the best that I can be.
The People's Climate March comes ahead of a United Nations summit this Tuesday where leaders from 125 countries are expected to announce non-binding initiatives to reduce carbon emissions that fuel global warming. President Obama got a head start Thursday when he announced his administration would dedicate nearly $70 million to install solar power in homes and businesses and improve energy efficiency in rural areas. One new project by the Department of Energy would train 50,000 veterans to become solar panel installers in the next 6 years.
Well, as the topic of climate change and what to do about it takes center stage here in New York City in the coming week, we host a roundtable discussion. Here from the Philippines is Liddy Nakpil. She's a member of the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice, a member of the International Board of 350.org, and also a convener of the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice. Estela Vasquez is also with us. She's Executive Vice President of 1199 SEIU, that's the Service Employees International Union, which expects to mobilize several thousand members on Sunday. In July, they joined with the New York State Nurses Association to announce their opposition to the Keystone XL pipeline due to public health and climate concerns. And Reverend Dr. Serene Jones is with us, President of Union Theological Seminary, which is hosting more than 200 religious and spiritual leaders from across the world for a Religions for the Earth conference this weekend before they all march on Sunday. We welcome you all to Democracy Now! Why don't we begin with you, Reverend Dr. Serene Jones. Why is Union Theological Seminary participating in the Climate March?
Well, the real question is, why isn't every single religious person in the United States getting to this climate march? At Union, we deeply believe that your Christian faith, your faith in God, and your commitment to love in the world means that you need to be committed to social justice. And right now, there is no greater social justice issue on our planet than climate change.
Well, earlier this year, your seminary took a bold step in divesting from the fossil fuel industry. Could you talk about that decision coming to it and the impact it's had on the religious community in the country?
Yes, we were very proud to be the first seminary in the world to divest, and we did it for the usually understood political, economic, and social reasons. But for us, the guiding force behind it was our faith commitment. We believe that as people of faith, we are charged, we are morally accountable for care of the earth, and to not engage in divestment and to back away from climate change is to really, to use religious language, to be sinful.
Can you talk about the other churches that have divested?
Yes, we were very supported by the United Church of Christ. The Presbyterians are right now in the process of considering it, and the list is growing daily. The churches, in one sense, are way ahead of the seminaries in this regard.
And hasn't the World Council of Churches also?
World Council of Churches, yes, who are meeting at Union this weekend to be part of this summit. They have divested.
What about the other part of that, divesting from fossil fuels, but where you reinvest?
Yes, and that is also a part of what we are exploring with respect to divestment. What we've discovered in our portfolio is there's a number of fossil fuel companies who are themselves trying to shift their resources to alternative resources like wind and sun. And we're figuring out how in our portfolio to support that by shifting our resources in that direction.
And Liddy Nakpil, the importance of this particular march coming just before the UN climate summit, and specifically how in the Philippines this has become such a major issue.
Well, the Philippines is one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change. You know, typhoons are a reality in the Philippines, but in the last few years, we have been visited by ever-increasing number and magnitude of super typhoons. I think the last one that the world has really come to know a lot about was Typhoon Haiyan, which was the strongest typhoon ever to hit landfall in recorded human history, we were told. And this typhoon has caused more than 2 million people to be homeless, and has caused more than 10,000 deaths in just a matter of a few days. So this issue is really important for us. There are several of us who are here to be in solidarity with the march. That is our actually foremost concern, not so much with the UN Climate Summit, from which we're expecting very little, I'm sorry to say.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but we are also joined by Clayton Thomas-Muller, who is an Indigenous rights and environmental justice activist and writer, leading the campaign, one of the leaders of the Idle No More campaign, co-director of the Indigenous tar sands campaign of the Polaris Institute, came down from Canada. Clayton Thomas-Muller is a member of the Matthias Kalom Cree Nation in northern Manitoba, Canada, living in Ottawa. Here for the People's Climate March. Welcome to Democracy Now! Forgive me if I mispronounced any part of that.
You did well.
Why come down from Canada?
Well, Idle No More, along with hundreds of other Indigenous communities and organizations the world over, have sent representatives here to participate and join in the tens of thousands, hopefully hundreds of thousands that will be marching in the streets on Sunday. I think, as mentioned by my sister from the Philippines, you know, Indigenous peoples the world over are the most vulnerable when we think about the impacts of climate change, whether it's forest-dependent peoples, coastal-dependent peoples, and of course, Indigenous peoples in the high Arctic are experiencing climate change on a compounding rate much worse than many other regions on the planet. And there's a double-edged blade there because Indigenous communities also happen to be experiencing the frontline impacts of the fossil fuel regime. You know, everywhere that big oil is operating in Canada, you know, we have the controversial Canadian tar sands, and Cree and Dene communities have massive cancer clusters occurring in their community because of the bioregional contamination that's happening from big oil's footprint in their lands. And so there's great concern about the lack of concrete political action from world leaders, and Indigenous leaders have converged here in New York City to send a very clear and direct message that our movement is strong and it's converging with other movements to put pressure on President Obama and, of course, on our own Prime Minister Stephen Harper and other world leaders to take concrete action on climate change.
We're going to break, and when we come back, we'll also find out why folks right here in New York, particularly labor activists, are also marching in this climate change march. It's called the People's Climate March. It's expected to be the largest climate march in history. This leading up to Tuesday, where expectations vary on what will happen inside the UN for a one-day UN climate summit. This is before the UN climate summit that takes place in Lima, Peru in December. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Back in a